Today we're working on upgrading the differential carrier of our Volvo. Now, if you've been following along, the Volvo already has a different differential in it. Let's get into all of that and we can kind of build up from there. So our car was a dual carbureted, I believe a 1.8 engine that made 85 brake horsepower. So as you can imagine, the factory differential would not support the current power that we're making with the Ford 2.3 liter turbo engine. And there's a couple reasons behind that. Now, one of the downsides is the I believe the hubs are keyed on, like with the keyway, and that's what kind of holds it there. So I'd imagine that's probably the weak point. We opted for putting in the Ford 8.8 differential, solid rear differential, that was actually from a 2000 Ford Explorer. So that's running basically, I think it's 94 to 2001-ish. Ford Explorer body style, which is a decent platform to start with. Now, the reason behind that is it's got 31 spline axles, so it's the larger axles that are in the Ford 8.8, so a little bit beefier that way. So they're relatively bare. There's only like the spring perch that you cut off. I believe it has a sway bar mount in the backside, but other than that, it's pretty much a blank canvas. One of the things we had to do with it is correct the axle tube length. Now, basically they're offset. I believe it's the driver's side is a longer axle tube than the passenger side. And obviously if you put it centered in the Volvo in this case, that axle tube would stick right out, or your pumpkin wouldn't be in the center of the car. So to do this, we kind of bravely dipped into this. There's a couple different ways of doing it. I would not suggest doing it yourself. What we did is we basically cut out the pressed in portion of the axle tube out of the pumpkin housing, and it's huge. It's super thick. I'm not entirely sure how thick the axle tube is. I want to say it's about it's at least 5/16 thick. And we basically chiseled out and took out sections after cutting, and basically cut the tube off and then started chiseling out sections and cutting slowly, and taking those pieces out of the pumpkin housing. Now, it seemed like a great idea at the time, but we were basically committed at a certain point, and yeah, I would suggest taking that to like a machine shop or a professional shop. They will probably cut the tube, section it, square it up, and then re-weld it, versus what we did, where we're cutting the tube, removing the remaining piece out of the pumpkin, and then we lined up the axle tube and then basically pressed or slammed in the axle tube into the pumpkin, and then proceeded to weld it. There's some problems with the welding too. It's kind of hard. You should be preheating that because it's a cast pumpkin area. So you should be preheating that, and then you should also be removing your gear set, and potentially the pinion as well, because there's some issues there. If you're getting that pumpkin that hot and you're welding it, you're going to probably cook either that seal, and potentially the bearing. You could weaken the bearing or have some issues that way. So there's definitely a reason to send this out to have them do it. But yeah, we didn't do that, and we made it work, and honestly it's been great. There's really no problems with it. I think we might have a little bit of seep, and I had a seep for about, I think, an inch at the top, and we ended up just grinding down and laying another bead there. Sure, it's not show car professional, but it's definitely functional, and it does the trick. Our differential, much like the Ford Explorers, or as they come out of a Ford Explorer rather, They have a Ford Trac-lock rear diff, or rear differential carrier, aka posi unit. What that setup is a clutch type differential. So it has your regular spider gears and then clutches between the spider gears and the differential carrier. And then when it sees a wheel slip, basically the clutch slips a little bit, then grabs, and you basically get both wheels having traction. That's how it's supposed to work. That probably works really well in a Ford Explorer with factory horsepower. It doesn't always, it's not the most reliable, let's put it that way. It's not consistent, and it's not reliable as far as being a traction device. There was a few instances, just driving the Volvo, you would break the tires loose and then one tire just spin right up, and you wouldn't get that posi, it wouldn't get correct power going to both wheels. You'd get one wheel just having at her, and spinning like crazy, and sure, it looks cool, but end of the day, it's almost embarrassing to have one wheel go versus both. Where we really noticed it was in autocross. So obviously you're maneuvering the car, you're going through slaloms, you're doing full U-turns. And when you shifted the weight of the car and accelerated, you'd get the one tire spin up, and then you'd basically say you're in first gear doing it like a U-turn kind of deal, with trying to do that at speed too. So you're doing this U-turn, you're in first gear, and you're like whatever, ready to power out of that U-turn. The weight transfer was, let's say, loading the right side and unloading the left, and the left would just go. It would just spin like crazy, right? And then you'd like, okay, I think the car's spinning, I'll shift, upshift to second, and then the car bogs because now it has traction at both wheels. So obviously you couldn't put down the power in first, and then you weren't in the right power band in second, so it became really, really annoying. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm not the perfect driver, I'm not making it's hard to be competitive, period, with my driving style and maybe my experience on autocross, but that doesn't help. And that is really annoying, because you're doing your best to try to keep it going, and you're like, I can't. What am I supposed to do? Downshift back to first again? Well, no, because now I've moved a little bit and bogged in second, and super annoying. We opted for the Eaton / Detroit Truetrac differential. Now this is a helical gear style, so yeah, it's limited slip. It kind of changes in how you maybe look at a limited slip. Let's say the car's in the air and you spin the wheels, they freewheel. One will turn the opposite direction, but it's when the power is being applied to the pinion gear, to your ring gear, that's what makes it work. And yeah, it should be absolutely ideal for our scenario, and it should really optimize how the Volvo really handles and how it works. And most importantly, it should be consistent, right? We shouldn't just see one wheel spin up. It should always kick out the same way, not just do whatever it wants to do when you have like a clutch style differential carrier. Making sure that we have the right setup obviously is the height, right? We want to make sure that the height of the housing is the same, and then the spot where the gears bolt on is on the same plane, which it is. It's direct fit, and yeah, it looks great. So we'll press on our bearings here, and then get this puppy in there. Obviously transfer gears too, so there's that. The Ford Explorer differential, typically they'll come with a 373 gear ratio. Now in this particular setup, we were basically trying to match the Ford Thunderbird Turbo Coupe which this whole drivetrain is out of. So we would end up with the same kind of, you know, gear ratios for transmission obviously are the same. If we maintain the same tire size and the same gear ratio, we should be in that same zone versus, you know, overshooting, I don't know, the tire size and not having the right drivability out of the car. When we bought our differential, it was fully assembled, so we had, you know, rotors and calipers. If you look at the differential, the axle tubes will have a flange at the end that will adapt to your brake caliper. Your brake caliper bracket is there, and then obviously your internal e-brake drum is there as well. So what we did is we grabbed a second set of caliper brackets, so basically that backing plate setup off of another differential that was being parted out, then cut the axle flanges in half, flip them, and that allowed us to run dual calipers on the back of the axle on our disc brakes, and obviously the second caliper is for our hydraulic handbrake. So we still utilized the mechanical handbrake by just modifying some of the backing plate, but that was a real simple way of, you know, getting a hydraulic handbrake as opposed to buying special brackets and all of that. We just literally, you know, bolted them up, and yeah, obviously your spacing is the same because it's the same axle flange. So it's been great. It's been absolutely wonderful as far as, you know, fitment. There's no vibrations, there's no pulsations. It's, you know, if you want to use the hydraulic handbrake, it works great. If you want to use the regular e-brake, it also functions absolutely normal. You wouldn't even know that there's basically dual calipers back there. As well as in braking performance, it's great. It acts like it would in the Explorer. For those that haven't done any solid rear axle repairs and are unfamiliar with how this plays out, basically you take off your calipers, you remove your brake discs in this case, you're going to remove your rear diff cover, obviously drain all the fluid out, gain access to your diff pin lock pin, remove your lock pin, slide out your diff pin, push your axles towards the center of the differential, and then you have access to remove the C-clips. That is what retains the axle in the differential. So you remove the C-clip, and then your axle can slide out of the differential. So that's basically how you take it apart. No big deal there. After we're going into this to get the carrier out, it is as simple as 4 bolts, 2 for each bearing cap. You remove the bearing caps, and it's basically, it's wedged in there, right? It has spacers on either side. It's important to note which spacers on what side, because all of your backlash and your gear placement is dependent on that, as well as your pinion setup. Now, we're not going to take the pinion out of the car because we don't have to. We just want to replace that that differential carrier. Truetrac still has a spot for your C-clip, so you'll basically put your axles back in. You will put your C-clips in, push your axle to the outside or away from the center, and then the Truetrac has a little spacer that goes in there to block your axles from coming in. So you just install the spacer, install the cap, and then they have a C-clip that goes in there that holds the cap in. So it basically can't go anywhere. So after that, yeah, just silicone on the cover, tighten that down, put in your fluid, reassemble your brakes, and yeah, you're pretty much good to go. I am completely aware of the right way to do the backlash and read the gear pattern, but in my experience, it seems that you can get away with having overall sizes close in your differential carrier, and typically your gear set is in the zone. Obviously do that at your own risk. This is the risk I'm taking, and I have no one to blame but myself in case it's a problem. It's the joy of working on your own stuff. I'm sure it will be absolutely fine. In the next video, we'll probably get into some more drivetrain concerns, quite possibly getting into the T5 and maybe freshening it up a little bit, or at least seeing why it doesn't want to shift in a second. I definitely appreciate the support. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care.